Gorgeous women, hi, it's JD. I'm dropping in to share some yummy wisdom with you for the equinox portal. This is my favorite time of year, both in the northern and the southern hemisphere, because it really represents that time when we prepare ourselves, either are preparing ourselves for winter's dreaming, or we're coming out of that deep, dark winter's dreaming. And for me, this feels like such a reflection of that passage that we go through each month when we're preparing for our bleed, and then we go deep into ourselves, into that dark place of our inner winter, especially if we struggle with premenstrual tension and we need to take that pause. And then we come out of it and we're coming into the light. So this equinox point in the southern hemisphere right now, it's us, we're coming into this equal day and night. We're coming into summer. We're about to move into a season where it's all about really working towards what we want to create in this summertime. It's that expression of the maiden with the flowers and the beautiful garments and all of the yumminess that we get to experience with the maximum amounts of light on the planet. And in the northern hemisphere, you're preparing for that deep, nourishing rest of winter. So when I'm working with archetypes, I really love gleaning stories. And the story of Inanna in her journey into the underworld is so deeply reflective. I'm going to be starting a once a month storytelling Sunday. So this is our storytelling Sunday gift, where we can take the story of Inanna and use it as our wisdom question throughout the month, so that we can deeply work with the archetypes of the feminine. Now, for those of you that don't know what an archetype is, in short, it's basically a blueprint, a psychological blueprint that all of us go through in our human journey. The tarot is based on archetypes. Nature has archetypes. You know, we've got the bird kingdom and the reptiles, and we've got the insects, and then within them is archetypes and archetypes and archetypes. And basically it's all aspects of divine consciousness that we can tap into as humans. And so we have these gorgeous stories about gods and goddesses and all of the yummy victories and the battles and the things that these stories enter into, which reflect the stories and the battles of our journey. And as women, we have full power stories that we go through, even just in 1 month around our menstrual cycle, let alone the rite of passage into being mama, and, you know, breaking up with lovers, and this whole balance and dynamic that we have of being modern women inside of a modern society, where a lot of us are just craving for those ancient practices to bring us home to really living in the cycles of nature. So, my darlings, Inanna, this story is next level, and it is so reflective of many things, especially the feminine wound that happens in all of us. And as you listen to this story and you take in the layers that she was stripped of, it's reflective of that, the stripping that happens in us when we go into our inner underworld. Life is not just rainbows all the time. Sometimes we are called into the underworld. We are called to be stripped of the identities that no longer serve us. And this is what winter's dreaming is about. It's what our premenstrual phase is about. It's that dreaming space where all of a sudden we realize that we're purpose-filled humans, and we're born for a reason. And sometimes our ego gets carried away with what it wants to create, rather than us living in this sacred feminine surrender of, well, what am I here to share? What am I here to do? And for me personally, I've just been through this massive Inanna journey where I refused to share in business unless it was being breathed from my soul, unless it was being breathed from a place of authentic need to share a message, to show up and care for others, to be in my purpose, which is to be me. Yeah. So Inanna is this rad, beautiful queen, and she is the queen of heaven. She's divine. She's the goddess of sexuality and sensuality, but she's also the goddess of war, which is quite confusing because how does war and sexuality and sensuality meet? How can a woman be so palatable in her deliciousness and also be the goddess of war and fury and stand up for what is right? So she's got this glorious kingdom in the heavens, and she hears that her sister Arishka girl's husband has died. So she decides that she's going to go and pay her respects. And her sister is the queen of the underworld. She's the queen of the subconscious mind. When we read these stories about the upper world and the underworld, it's often the places that are hidden. It's the parts of ourselves that are hidden in the layers of our subconscious. Often the things that we are not 100% comfortable with. And my darlings, life is light and darkness. This feminine journey is not always pretty. Mother Nature is not always palatable. Sometimes she is stinky and swampy, and sometimes she's dark, and sometimes she's fierce, and sometimes she's wild, and sometimes she is as beautiful as a flower. And that is us. So Inanna goes to the gates of the underworld, and she shows up, and Arishka girl has heard that she's on her way, and she's demanded that Inanna be stripped of her queenliness. So at the first gate, she has to take off her royal crown, and she's going through this process of like, why do I have to take off these things that reflect who I am? Like, why do I have to do that? Anyway, she takes it off, and then she gets to the second gate, and she's asked to take off her lapis necklace. So reluctantly, she hands it down. She gets to the third gate, and she's asked to take off her breast beads. Say that a few times quickly. So she takes off her beads. And then at the fourth gate, she's asked to take off her breastplate, her armor on her breast. And she takes a big breath, and she hands the armor. And then at the second, where are we? Fifth gate. She's asked to take off her belly chains. So she takes off her belly chains and her gold bracelets. And if you think about the wrists, the hips, the belly chain, these are they're part of the pillars of our sacred feminine temple, the way that our body is as a temple. If you look at the energy portals in your body, this is stuff, super juicy stuff of feminine embodiment practices. So the wrists and the hips are like parts of the pillars of our temple, of the amount of energy that we cultivate and contain. And so she's been asked to take these symbols of those pillars off. And she does. And then she gets to the 6th gate and she's asked to hand over her lapis wand. So she hands over her wand. And then at the 7th gate, she's asked to take off her royal garment. She takes it off and she's taken into the throne room, and Ereshkigal is there and she's furious. She's always been so jealous of Inanna. And she's like, how dare you? How dare you come? This is my domain. This is my domain. What are you doing here? And she casts a spell on her, and Inanna is condensed into a pile of rotting flesh. And she's hung up on a fish hook, a large fish hook. She's hung up on a massive hook and put in the sun for 3 days and 3 nights, symbolizing the 3 suns and the 3 solar cycles, as in Scorpio, Saggy, Capricorn. The 3 lunar cycles that we'll go through in this preparation for the depth of winter or the depth of summer. Yeah? So she's hung up for 3 days and 3 nights to die, to rot. And Inanna has been incredibly smart. So she goes off, and she had already asked her handmaiden that if she wasn't home, she didn't return by a certain time, then she was meant to go, he had to go and get help. So her handmaiden went off to the god. What was the god's name? I've got it written down. The god Enki. Aw, way to wreck a story without the details. So, Ninshaba, her dude, her right hand dude, he went to Enki and asked for assistance, and Enki created these 3 little beings from the inside of his fingernails, and because they weren't human, they could enter the underworld without question. So off they went, and they found Ereshkigal in labor, and she was having a really hard time, and they stepped in and they helped her and they loved her and they assisted her, and she finally gave birth. And when she gave birth, she said, how will I ever thank you enough? And they said, well, you can release Inanna. And she agreed that she would release Inanna to go back to the upper world, but only if somebody was brought back in her place. So Inanna was released, and she went back up the gates. She put on her royal garment. After rotting in the sun, she got to put on her garments again. She took her wand in her hand. She put on her belly chains and her bracelets. She put on her breastplate. She put on her breast chains. She put on her lapis necklace, and then she put her crown back on. And she went up into the upper world, her domain, and she's walking through the streets witnessing everybody crying because they'd missed her so much. And when she walked into her throne room, her husband was there celebrating, sitting on her throne with women dancing for him. He's having a fabulous time. So it was a no-brainer for her. She was like, well, obviously he needs to be sent down to the underworld. Cheeky shit. So she sends him to the underworld, and his sister vouches for him, and she's like, no, 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 send me instead. And all the gods and goddesses got together and they decided that she could take his place for half of the year, but he had to go into the underworld for half of the year, very similar to the story of Persephone and Demeter. So here we have it, beloved sisters and brothers who are listening. This is so symbolic that sometimes life requires us to be stripped bare of our identity, of the things that if we're getting too attached to them, sometimes we have to just be stripped bare and go down deep into the subconscious layers of the shit that stinks about ourselves. And preparing for winter's dreaming, preparing for this time of year where the days are getting shorter in the Northern Hemisphere and we have this opportunity to go into the underworld. I love my underworld now. I feel very comfortable with the deeper, darker emotions that arise. It's taken a long time for me to get here, but I feel really blessed to be here. And in my personal journey, I've just been through an entire year of being in the underworld, going through some deep grief from the loss of my father and from the loss of a very significant, beautiful relationship. And I realized that there was ways that I'd crafted myself into being that were no longer serving me. Ways that I was striving out of ego, that I wasn't 100% in alignment with myself. And I've got this thing where as a space holder, I believe that it's my responsibility to show up in authenticity. And when my soul is calling me into a place that is real and raw, that I need to listen. And sometimes burnout is our underworld. Sometimes a relationship breakdown is our underworld. Sometimes it literally is just those 6 days of our premenstrual phase. There's many reasons that we will go to underworlds in life, but the thing is that there are ways for us to prepare. There are ways for us to embrace these shadow aspects of life. And working with these archetypes, knowing that we are both Inanna and Arishka girl, we can begin to soften and stop judging ourselves and other people, to allow ourselves to be exactly what we are, and to heal from the feminine wound, because many of us have felt like we have literally been hung up on a fish hook at school. I mean, women were ripped of our menstrual rights, the right to rule over our wombs for many millennia. So as a collective, we're actually coming up out of the underworld now. So, my darlings, how are you preparing for these coming seasons? There's 3 months between now and the middle of the year. Well, this feels like the middle of the year for me. But you know, everybody, I encourage you to study the wheel of the year. The medicine wheel of your womb, the wheel of the year, according to where you live. You know, the Australian Aboriginals have their own wheel of the year, the North American Indigenous do, the Mayans, the Celts. I encourage you to honor the ancestry of the land that you're on. Look at what the wheel of the year is for your land where you are. Look at the medicine wheel of your womb, and if you don't know how to do that, have some amazing offerings happening. Look at the medicine wheel of your ancestry. Have a look at the way that your ancestors honored the seasons. So in this way, you've got this beautiful, rounded, well-rounded look. And if you are a brother, you're solar identified. So we women are lunar rhythmic. Our hormonal cycles are around the moon, and the masculine, male-identified humans are solar identified. So they're working with the solar cycle. We're all working with both. That's sacred union. Yet some of us are identified more with either lunar or solar, and our hormones reflect that, and that's a whole other offering. So Melissa and I are offering Alchemy in the Red Tent. It's a place for us to explore these archetypes, to go deep into our menstrual mysteries and our sacred sexuality, because they are not separate. Our sacred sexuality and our menstruation are they're together. So our self-care practices need to involve our sexual self-care and our menstrual self-care. And Melissa and I are absolute advocates of doing this in a super fun, practical way that is juicy, juicy, juicy. And this way we are living ancient wisdom as modern women. Love you, my sisters. I hope you enjoyed Storytelling Sunday, and I look forward to sharing with you really soon. So what's down in the mystery school right now for the 2019 Scorpio, Saggy, Capricorn season is we will be having moon cycle Mondays, where we talk about menstrual mysteries and what's going on with Lady Luna. We've got What the Fuck Wednesday, where you can just have a little vent in the Facebook group and be like, well, what is going on with society right now? Because it's important that we keep it real. And we have, and you know, in keeping it real, there are topics that we as women need to discuss. So please share in the group if you have things that are pressing on your heart that you want to discuss. The more the merrier. I've been going through a really introverted time, so I personally haven't been that active in the group, but it's there for everybody. Like it's been set up for everybody to share and to be there in sisterhood. We have Sacred and Sensual Saturdays, where we talk about the sacredness of our bodies, the sensuality, relationships, all juicy women's business topics. And then once a month we have our Storytelling Sunday, and that will be woven around a theme that's happening. So with Scorpio season, which we're in now, it's very Plutonian, it's very underworld. Working with Inanna and Arishka Girl is really full power. And as I'm inspired to share, I'll be dropping in. I love you so much. I've missed you, sisters. Thank you, thank you, thank you for being here. For those of you who feel the call to travel with Melissa and I with Alchemy in the Red Tent, we only have 5 places left, and we start next week. So pop on in. I love you. Bless you. Have an amazing, amazing season, Scorpio season, and we'll see you in the Facebook group, or, you know, messages or whatever. Whatever floats your boat, love. Or if you want some one-on-one soul support sessions, menstrual cycle mapping, all the things, I'm here. Love you. Bye. Mwah.